There's a particular irony in medical training that nobody really warns you about. You spend years learning exactly how the human body works, what it needs, what damages it, what the research actually says. And simultaneously, you live in a way that violates almost everything you're learning. Not because you don't know better, but because you have no choice, and because you've imbibed the feeling of somehow being invincible or immune to the problems that you treat. You think that somehow knowledge is a kind of armour. You believe that because you've been selected through so much grueling training, there's a kind of self-selection going on, and also because patients treat you as though you're not allowed to be sick, you're not allowed to be unwell. And there's an aura, I think, that medicine wrongly established when it was much more paternalistic. I'm talking about 120-hour weeks, surgical weekends on call that ran 56 hours straight, not with proper rest in between, but with short gaps where you'd close your eyes and get pulled back within half an hour. Barely time to eat, barely time to shower. 3 in the morning, your beeper goes off for the 4th time, and you grab whatever chocolate is within reach just to stay functional. Coffee as much as you can on repeat. And you keep going because everyone around you is doing exactly the same. And because that's the deal you signed up for. A kind of stoic self-sacrifice for the greater good. And just what is expected of you. Here's the thing about being a doctor who isn't taking care of himself. You know intellectually exactly what you're doing wrong. You can lecture a patient about sleep deprivation with complete clinical confidence while running on 4 hours yourself. The gap between knowing and doing is something I understand very personally. I'm Dr. Michael, a family doctor of 20 years with a decade of surgical and emergency medicine training prior to that, and this is the Accidental Doctor. If that name resonates with you, you'll understand why by the end of this video. So, 10 years, that's roughly how long my hospital training grind went on for. And what I didn't fully appreciate during it was how much was accumulating. My weight crept up significantly. My body was running on sugar, caffeine, and stress hormones. But I was young, and when you're young, you absorb the hits. The energy is still there. You mistake functioning for thriving. You don't see it building until one day you do. The shift came when I moved into family medicine. That's not to say that family medicine is a holiday, it really isn't. The load is real, the hours are still long, but something changed in me. I had more space inside me to be intentional, to think about how I was actually living rather than just getting through the week. And the effect was almost immediate. Within a relatively short period of making more deliberate choices, sleeping more consistently, moving with more purpose, eating with more thought, I lost about 12 kilograms. Not from a strict program, not from anything extreme, just from closing the gap between what I knew and what I was actually doing. I should be clear about the food piece because it's been a bit contradictory. I've always eaten healthily in the sense that I cooked real food and wasn't completely oblivious. But at the same time, I was also eating a lot of unhealthy things on a regular basis. Not in spite of knowing better, but alongside it. Knowing the right things doesn't automatically mean doing them, especially when you're exhausted and pressed for time. And that particular tension I understand from the inside. When the pressure eased and the intentionality came in, the difference in how I felt and in what the numbers showed was significant enough to make me curious about what was actually going on underneath. So I started testing myself more systematically. Regular blood panels, body composition, sleep tracking. I'd always exercise, that was never the issue, but I got more structured about it. And I really want to be clear again, structure does not mean joyless. I've always kept movement something that I actually enjoy, social whenever possible, something that fits into a real life with real demands on your time. The gym as a punishment approach has never appealed to me, and I don't think it works long term for most people anyway. What I was really doing was running experiments on myself, adjusting one variable at a time, watching what happened, trying to understand the mechanism rather than just following a protocol that someone else had designed, and trying to make it an individual thing for myself. And the results kept pointing in the same direction, both in my own data and in the research I was reading. Your body has a set of basic operating assumptions, conditions that it expects to be true, and modern life violates almost every single one of them. To maintain healthy human physiology demands movement spread throughout the day, not sitting and barely moving and then 1 hour at the gym or an hour playing tennis or something like that. And the reason this matters mechanically is that your skeletal muscle, that's the muscle that moves your joints, is one of the primary places your the body clears glucose from the bloodstream. When the muscles are regularly contracting, they're doing that job continuously. When you sit for most of the day, that process stalls. Insulin has to work harder, and over months and years, that quiet shift becomes insulin resistance, which is the root of a surprisingly large number of downstream problems. Your body expects real food, things with a recognizable biological origin. What it doesn't have a good response to is food that's been engineered with enough precision to override the signals that are supposed to tell you you've had enough. Those signals, satiety hormones, gut responses, blood sugar feedback, they work fine on a plate of home-cooked food. They get completely outmaneuvered by a lot of what's going on in the middle aisles of the supermarket. That's not an accident of taste preference. It's done by design. Our stress response was built for something short and physical. Our bodies mobilize, our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, cortisol goes up, adrenaline goes up, and then when they're not needed, the body relaxes. But it wasn't built for low-grade, permanent background hum of modern stress, the inbox, deadlines, financial pressure, the news cycle, all of that which keeps cortisol sort of quietly elevated and chronically elevated. And cortisol has other results in that it causes the storage of fat, particularly visceral fat that's inside the abdomen, not the stuff that you see on the outside. It causes the breakdown of muscle tissue. It suppresses your immune system. It disrupts hormonal regulation and almost everything else. The problem isn't that we experience stress, it's that we just don't have consistent, significant physical release that our bodies need in order to process that stress and the cortisol. Sleep is perhaps the most underestimated of all of them. I saw this in my own data with continuous glucose monitoring and heart rate variability. A bad night's sleep measurably impairs insulin sensitivity and heart rate variability the following day, and we'll get into those in future videos. The research backs this up. Even a single night of significant sleep restriction can reduce insulin sensitivity by around 25%. Across a population of people sleeping 5 or 6 hours habitually and thinking that's fine, the metabolic consequences are substantial. And on top of that, the hormones that support muscle growth and recovery are predominantly released during sleep. And without restorative sleep, there is no meaningful recovery. And then there's connection. This one sounds softer than the rest, but the physiology is just as real. Chronic social isolation is a documented physiological stressor. It elevates cortisol, it increases inflammation and inflammatory markers, and it meaningfully impacts the immune system and the longevity cycle, the amount of time that a person lives, basically. If you had 1,000 people following you online while there's nobody to call when you're struggling, it doesn't count as a community, and that's at least not to your own nervous system. These things do not operate in isolation, they compound each other. And the unsettling part is that they're all running simultaneously in most people's lives, quietly, without anyone drawing the connecting lines. So why? How did we end up so comprehensively at odds with our own biology? Honestly, it's really not complicated, and it's certainly not a conspiracy. It's just that the forces that are shaping how most people live have no particular incentive to optimize for health. The food that's most convenient, most available, and most affordable happens to also be the very food designed to be well-funded in terms of how it's designed and produced by scientists who are also designing it to be as rewarding as possible and as difficult to stop eating as possible. And that's not a coincidence, it's a business model. The more you eat, the better the margins. Real food does not work that way. An apple is not engineered to make you eat 3 more apples. Then there's the attention economy. Every app, every platform, every notification is optimized to keep you engaged and stationary. Stillness and passive consumption is the product. Movement, reflection, and genuine rest, none of those actually generate any revenue. And then there's the healthcare system, which I say with genuine respect for the people who work inside it. It's structurally oriented towards treating established disease rather than really preventing the drift that leads to it. Now, I've lived this from the inside. The 7 to 10 minute appointment is not designed for nuanced conversations about lifestyle. It's designed for a presenting complaint and a management plan. In that system, by the time there's something to treat, the drift has usually been going on for years. Now, none of this is malicious. It's the natural result of systems that were never designed with your long-term health as the primary goal. Understanding that is actually clarifying, because it means that the solution isn't to try harder or to have more discipline. It's to make some deliberate choices that push back against the current, because the current is not going to carry you somewhere good on its own. And I should mention one more thing, because I think it often gets left out of these conversations. Around the same time I was working through all of this physically, I also did some serious work on the psychological side, looking at patterns, at how I was responding to stress, at what was driving certain habits, the stuff that doesn't show up on a blood panel for many years, but shows up everywhere else in your life. I became convinced that you can optimize sleep, nutrition, and training all you like, and plateau in ways that don't make sense until you look at what's happening underneath. And that piece is a part of this too, and I'll be coming back to it in future videos. This channel is the result of everything that I've described. I've spent years working through this as a clinician, watching what happens to patients over time, as someone who has lived the wrong version of it for a decade at least, and as someone who's been running experiments on himself long enough to have some genuine perspective on what actually moves the needle. What I want to do here is go deep on each of these areas properly: sleep, metabolic health, the stress response, movement, nutrition, the psychological side. Each one deserves its own treatment, not a bullet point. And so that's what I'm going to give them. Now, if this is relevant to where you are, if you felt the gap between how you think you should feel and how you actually feel, subscribe and let's work through it properly together. Please drop comments below with what you want to start with. I'm genuinely curious as to what's on your mind, and I will try to read as many of those comments as possible. Thank you for watching. If this landed for you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. The person at work who's been on 3 medications since they were 40 and can't figure out why. The friend who says they're fine, but clearly they're not. Sometimes just naming what's happening is the thing that starts to shift it. This is The Accidental Doctor, where we talk about uncommon sense medicine. Stay well. Next video coming soon. Ciao for now.